Hi friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com again, and today's video is ultimately going to end up being a demonstration reading using the Tarot Noir deck that came out a number of years ago. However, the beginning of this video will be just a walkthrough of the deck. It's a modern take on Tarot Marseille. It's been out for at least 8 years, I think. I think it came out in 2013. And I bought it when it first came out. So it's been out a while. And the reason I mention that is because you've probably seen a million other videos of this, but I've never done one. And so I figured it's about time. And in order to have a payoff for my subscribers who are in it to learn interpretations, I'll do that at the last several minutes of the video. Now this deck comes in a nice fold box. This is the first edition. I don't know what they've done with subsequent editions. I know I'm not a big fan of this kind of packaging because it's kind of wasteful. And then, the way the deck is broken down into two piles. For this reason, it's in a storage unit where I have to have like the kind of decks that have this kind of packaging because they don't fit in my smaller like apothecary kind of drawers, And because of that, I hardly ever reach for it. When it first came out and I first bought it, I used it all the time. But I hardly ever use, I hardly ever use it. And this morning I was thinking about it, and I thought, oh, let me pull that out and do a couple demonstration readings with it. It's somebody recently, like last night, and I apologize that I'm not recalling the name, but asked me, with all the versions, the different versions of TDM decks, does it matter much if, a character looks in one direction and, in some decks and in another deck? And that's a great question and a great point, to which I just respond, you read the deck, whatever the deck indicates, that's how you read the deck. You might have meanings for, the words, the cards, right? But it's more than just having like keywords memorized. It's how the cards interact with each other, and it's how something strikes you in the moment. So although it's important to have an arsenal of understanding, which is why I do all these historic decks, so that you get a greater sense of where they come from, it's also important to read the deck itself. So for example, we have the Fool walking in one direction, and if by chance in a reading, it was, face to face, for example, with the bachelor who's facing him in this particular scenario, then you could definitely like interpret it as, these two are in cahoots, they're simpatico with one another, that kind of thing, right? Whereas if we get a character, let's see, who might be looking away, and of course I'm not going to find one. Okay, here we go, right? So they might be said they're working in the same direction, but not necessarily with one another. Or, for example, if they appeared this way, right? Where we have two faces that are opposing one another, that they're denying one another. This guy's physically leaving this guy, right? That the dynamic or the relationship. So just read the deck. And how the cards interact with one another. But I'll get more to that when I do a reading at the end. But throughout the review, or if that's what you want to call this, I'll certainly be making commentary. So we have the tradition of the French names with this deck. Oh, I also want to mention that it comes with a delicious book. Very wonderful book, and if I spoke French, I'm sure I would really enjoy it. I don't speak French, and I guess I haven't been motivated enough to read to try to make it out. But now with like Google Text, I guess I could really actually do that. I never even thought of it. But there's no excuse for me not to read it now, which, you know, in this modern day and age, it's books written in other languages, although it's a little bit of a handicap, you know. You can still, you know, get the gist. But this book is gorgeous. It's just, you know, such a pretty book. And look at those illustrations. I mean, every card is illustrated, so you can't beat that. So we have the French names as opposed to English, which I appreciate. Let's zero in to get some of the detail. So, you know, obviously it's not an exact copy of any particular TDM, but it's in keeping, right? It's in keeping with TDM. For me, I don't really care if a deck is TDM. I mean, you know, I love the Italian decks. I love the Swiss decks. You know, I love some of the TDM decks. But mostly I like pip decks. I like pip decks or non-scenic pip decks that have a nod to the historic decks. And so for that reason, this deck definitely fits that bill and was one of the reasons why I was so very attracted to it when it came out. Because I guess in recent years, maybe there are more and more pip decks coming out, but I think, you know, maybe I stand corrected on that too, because I think more or less the only pip decks we're getting are like the, you know, republications of historic decks. I do have a handful of modern day pip style decks, you know, so they do exist, but I think for the most part, you know, most of the pip style decks, you know, that are available now are recreations of the historic decks. So when, you know, a new slant comes out, you know, I was attracted to it, to buy it. But I just don't reach for it because the packaging is inconvenient, and then that puts it in my cabinet over there, which is less convenient than, you know, my smaller apothecary drawers where I could just reach from my desk, my table, my tarot table, and reach it. And yeah, so I don't really, and also the cards are large. Let me pause and get a regular card. Alrighty, so here is a size comparison using the Nicholas Conver Tarot of Marseille deck by Artisan Tarot. So here's a blank card. So you see, it's quite a bit larger than a regular tarot deck. And the Artisan decks are standard tarot size, with the exception of the Noble, which is smaller because that's how it was made. So you see it's quite a bit larger. So that's another reason why I don't really use it, because, you know, my table, although I have a big table, my table is like a 45 or 47 inch round reading surface, you know, so I have plenty of room, you know, like with a standard deck of tarot cards, I can lay out all 78 cards on this table. But it gets really like cumbersome when I try to do a large numbered, you know, large number cards, you know, a large spread using this deck. It's just like, so then I reach for something else. But look at these cards are beautiful. It's unfortunate, you know, and I guess they, you know, I don't know the size, you know, why they did it this big. Maybe to, you know, to make it seem like it was in keeping with the old style cards. Maybe they were large. They probably were, since they were painted and they had to be, the detail had to be done by hand for some of those. I'm talking about the Italian, not the French engravings. I mean, it's a beautiful deck. Look at the waves. Very nice. I don't know what changes were made, if they have more than 2 editions. I think they did. I think this went out of print, and then, you know, it was back by popular demand, and they came out with a second version. You know, I don't know how it's different. I do think the backs might be somewhat different with the second edition, and I do know that these cards are gilded. It's not like a in your face, real shiny. It's more like a brassy, bronzy kind of edging. So I don't know what they did with the later editions. Let's see if you can see it better here. No, it's not a sunny day, so I'm not getting a lot of sunshine in here. But you can tell, even still, that it's gilded. And the it's more like a brassy, bronzy. It's more like a brassy, not a bronzy. So here we have a suit of swords. I mean, how elegant, right? That is truly elegant. So my signature spread, for those of you who've been following me for a while, you know my signature spread is like a 13-card spread, which is not a huge number of cards, but it's enough, you know, and you can get like some really, you know, great insight. But it's just, I just can't really facilitate it easily on this table because these cards are just so darn big. So it's really unfortunate. I wouldn't mind at all if they came out with a smaller version, you know, even if it was bridge size, like even really small. I'd buy it because I would use it, you know. I would, you know, I'm always looking for workhorse decks, the decks that I grab all the time. But my workhorse decks tend to be, you know, standard tarot size or smaller. I love bridge size. Now, I don't know if the Queen of Swords is going to pop up in the reading, the demonstration readings that I'm doing. But you can see how, you know, even though this is a Queen of Swords and you might have a whole line or way of thinking about the Queen of Swords, you know, how do you not notice the fluidity of her dressing gown, right? And how it almost looks like water. Let's see, you know, for an example, and you know, we have the rolling hills here of the of the Knight of Swords, you know, where, you know, the rolling hills might lead you to think, whoa, a rocky ride, or a you know, not an easy trip to make, either physically or like intellectually, right? So you definitely, you know, you definitely want to read the deck, you know, because her gown, you know, well, I have them in sequence here, but, you know, her gown might, you know, the corner of this card could flow into, you know, another scenic card, like another one of the trump cards, you know, and the fluidity or the connection made between them can take you to a whole different place other than just, you know, memorized card meanings, right? I mean, you want to know what they mean, but you know, but when you have additional visual clues about what might be going on, you have the meaning of the card and innuendo. I guess innuendo is a good way of putting it, or look how beautiful that is. You know, so this is something excuse me, that's you know, you don't see in TDM, you know, don't think we see the roots. We see, you know, the more refined and elegant, you know, arrangement of flowers. But, you know, so we see the roots, you know, in that one card. So, you know, you see there's like, it's itself, you know, it's not a carbon copy. And no deck really is. No deck is a carbon copy of another. Every time a new deck is you know, even every time an old deck, a historic deck is given new life, the publishers always see something else in it that maybe, you know, they change. And even back in the day when they were copying decks, you know, maybe half the time they didn't even realize what they were copying. And that's why some of them are a hot mess, you know, visually. So it's always awesome to see a new twist. I mean, this almost looks like a wave, you know, engulfing the Queen. So if anybody knows if this deck is available in a more standard size, please drop me a note down below, because I would buy it if I'm not too late, because this really is a lovely deck. I'm not over impressed by the cardstock. It kind of feels like, well, the back side has a bit of a lamination, which is fine. But the front side, it looks the same, but it's not. This feels glossy, and this feels dull, even though there is a sheen. But it just feels like, I don't know. I'm not overwhelmed by the quality of the cardstock. And it's so big. I mean, I have piano fingers. Growing up, my aunt, who was a concert pianist, you know, studied at Curtis, you know, she used to say, "Oh my God, your hands are so beautiful. They're so long." And, you know, even for me, it's a big deck, you know, with my long fingers. So that's another reason that I don't pull for it. I guess, I don't know, maybe they always intended this to be kind of more like a collector's item, although I know a half a dozen of you will write and say, "I use it all the time, it's my favorite deck," so I apologize for that. So, because it is a favorite deck, it's a beautiful deck, but for the reasons I mentioned that are personal to me, I don't reach for it, you know, I just don't reach for it, and I wish that were different, because it is beautiful, and I'm reaching for it today. Now look at that 3. Oh my gosh, it's so elegant. So it honors the arrangement of the pips, even if their embellishments are, you know, unique to them. Okay, so it's going to take me a while to shuffle this. So, but to you, it will seem like a split second. So let me shuffle these up really good, so, you know, so that they're not in order and we get a decent read. But it may take me a little bit because these cards are so big and it's not like I can riffle shuffle them. So I'll be back. Alrighty, I'm back. It took me a long time to shuffle these cards because you can't really, I am unable to shuffle them in a very efficient and proficient way. So if there are any cards that are sequential, you know, I apologize for that, but this is not a real reading, so it's fine for, you know, instructional purposes. And when I handled to mix the cards, I put it out there that this was not a real reading and that it was for instructional purposes. So the intent is to demonstrate, you know, in interpretation. So the question that came to me was, there's 2 couples that were going to go see a concert. And now that things have escalated with COVID, this is early 2022 with the Omicron version. Now this, couple A no longer really wants to go to the concert, but they feel guilt because couple B, they kind of badgered to like buy the tickets, which were very expensive. And they badgered them to come along, come on, it'll be great. So the other couple, acquiesced. And now the first couple who badgered the second couple doesn't want to go. So, it's like that kind of thing. So the question is, not should we go, because couple A decided they're not going. But they don't really know how couple B feels, but they want to know how they should broach the subject. So what would be the most constructive way to broach the subject with couple B to let them know they themselves no longer want to go? We're going to do maybe, 2 rows of 3, so we can get maybe a 6-card reading if I can get the cards to fit within the camera. So just so we see, we have the Emperor, the female Pope, Le Batelier, and yeah, see, I have all my lower trumps, so that is another reason why I don't necessarily reach for this deck. Okay, you see, because even after a good shuffling, as well as I can manage the cards, I'm still only getting trump cards. Make a liar out of me. So yeah, so there's an issue, I suppose, with shuffling. Okay, so we have, immediately we start out with 2 people in positions of power. This could be group A, this can be group B. Maybe, maybe both groups are of women, or maybe, this is an indication that if there are women in the, if either partner and, is a female, maybe it should be a woman-to-woman thing. Let the women deal with it. Let the women handle it. So the first thing I might suggest is that, let the woman of your group, in your partnership, broach the subject. Now, if both of the people in the partner A group are women, then, it's a woman thing. So it's just something to like broach between the women. And maybe it's something that, other women would understand. And then we have Le Batelier. So we have maybe some trickery, some underhandedness. Maybe it will be received by the first group, the first couple, as being, kind of a shitty thing, because you kind of badgered us into buying the tickets, and now you're changing the thing. Maybe a split, maybe going a different way. But the way, what to focus on, perhaps, we have, the money aspect of it. Tell them in time so that they have time to either, sell or return their tickets. And I guess you don't return them, but you can, resell them. And maybe for a decent profit, maybe the longer you wait, the less you're going to get. So act quickly on it so that you get at least something back. Have it be an exchange between the women of the group, and if they're all women, then that just makes it nicer and easier. And that's how I would broach it. I would use the argument, and there will be some annoyance. I think they definitely will be a bit annoyed, but if you give them enough time, they'll be able to make back their money, and be able, maybe to sell them before it gets impossible to sell. And there may be a parting of ways, because if we see these 2 cards as sequential, it may cause a conflict between the 2 groups for now. So be careful how you do it. But it might not be a permanent thing. It's more like a thing that's just an annoyance, and kind of like a pet peeve that now, they saw, you know, they saw a side of you that they don't feel is, you know, flattering, because maybe they never wanted to go in the first place and they kind of did it themselves, you know, they kind of acquiesced. But it's not of a major thing. It's not, it won't be on a major scale. But do speak now rather than later, because the longer you wait, the less you'll make back. So let's do another reading. I'll be back after I try to shuffle the cards better again and come up with a different question. Okay, so I thought of another question. Again, as I handled and mixed the cards, my intent was for this to be a demonstration reading and not a real reading. Okay, so I came up with another question, and because I'm a grandmom, I have grandmom on my mind. And the question is, you know, by, you know, a couple who come and say, we're new grandparents, you know, the child is getting old enough now to play with toys, but she's got a trillion different toys, and, you know, it's just more plastic in the environment that's probably going to end up in the, you know, in a dump somewhere. And aside from clothes, like, what kind of things can we, you know, buy for, or, you know, ways to contribute to her life besides materialistic toys, you know, for gifts and stuff like that. So that was the intent. And let's see, we'll try another 6 cards. The female Pope was in the last spread. Okay, we have the 6 of Cups. The 5. The 4. Okay, it's still not really well shuffled. That's regrettable, but again, it's one of the reasons why I don't reach for this deck very often. The Ace. And then the 10 of Coin. So we notice one of the things is that we have a passive, you know, a passive deck, which is, you know, what I mean by that is that, you know, we have cards predominantly from the suit of cups and then an ace, which are considered the more passive suits, right? And so that might suggest right off the bat, right, yeah, out of the gate, you know, something that might be on the cerebral side, something that might be on the artistic side or the creative side. Could be an experience, but not jumping out of airplanes, you know, not, you know, doing anything with extreme physical exertion, but more, you know, of the nature to stimulate the mind. And then, you know, you could think of, you know, things like that. I mean, you know, of course, the suit of cups is also water. So, you know, it could, you know, if anybody has a swimming pool or if you have access to a pool, it could, you know, indicate like, you know, swimming lessons or something like that. You know, you could go that way too. But I'm more struck myself personally as it being just like a passive kind of activity. Also, because it ends with such a high money card, you know, it might be an indicator that these sort of activities pay off, right, in a big way. And this can also, you know, for me, because there's 10 coins, right, an indicator that, you know, start building for, you know, for her, maybe create a bank account, you know, put aside a little nest egg or a little investment so that, you know, by the end, you know, by the time, you know, she's old enough or he's old enough, you'll have maybe a little jackpot for them. Starting out with the female Pope, you know, go with your intuition, go with, you know, what's natural, you know, ask, now the female Pope, if you notice, is not looking in the direction of the other cards. So she's pensive, you know, so, you know, it might be, you know, another reason why I might think that this is a cerebral kind of thing is, you know, something, you know, that is a bit more, you know, a little more cerebral or intellectual, and also considerate, you know, so, you know, inquire inquire, what activities, observe, so you can see what activities the child is predisposed towards. But the indicators by these cards would be a suggestion to go the intellectual route, maybe put some money aside, get him or her started on something that will be, exciting for them and stimulate their minds. And we'll do maybe one more. Okay, and the last reading will be, there's a person who comes and they have to put up boundaries with an acquaintance/friend. The acquaintance/friend thinks of them more significantly than, they think of the friend, or that the friend, has, overstepped boundaries, or has greater expectations for this individual than the individual has for them, and so the person comes and asks, how do I tactfully, or how do I broach this, how do I accomplish what I need to accomplish, which is to put up boundaries between myself and this other individual. Okay, we have the Five of Cups, an emotional challenge, right? Beginning, opportunity, stability. So be, even though it will be awkward, speak it out, it'll change things. Maybe it's not the Tower, but it's the beginning, right? We have an Ace of an emotional suit. So the direct conversation might be a bit of a challenge or a bit awkward, but it will bring a new direction toward greater stability and Boundaries. Four of Cups could be an indicator of that. Okay, then we have the beginning of a new dynamic. Okay, so here we have, they're of the same suit, so they're a pair. So we have mutual respect. It'll end with mutual respect because they're glancing at one another and they're in agreement, and they have an understanding with one another. So be direct, be honest, despite however awkward it is. It will be the opportunity for something new. The next card is stability in the emotional department, a whole new dynamic, which is one of mutual respect. Thank you, friends. Until next time, peace and stay well.